If you heard last week's podcast, you know that we got to interview Abby Chambers, who is not someone that fits the traditional mold of born in church, children's ministry, youth ministry, Christian college. It wasn't like that at all. And it was an inspiring story for us to hear on how she was discipled and has now become a disciple maker herself. Well, we've got another person today, Josh, that we're going to interview who has a similar type of story. And we hope that it is also encouraging to you in the same way. Let's chat about it. Welcome to Clear Creek Chat. That's Chat with two T's because this podcast is coming to you from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is a ministry of the Clear Creek Church of Christ. In every episode, we gather together a friend or two and talk about issues that touch our lives locally and also have a broader implication for the kingdom of God. My name is Mitchell Halstead, and today I'm joined by my friend, Josh Henninger.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on the podcast today, Josh. So before we jump into why Josh is on the podcast exactly, I wanted to ask him a question. So Josh is interning with us in the youth ministry this summer. And one of these recurring jokes we've been having is that Josh just is desperate to become a great father one day. Not anytime soon.
Hopefully.
But you often joke about how you want to practice your dad skills and acquire dad skills. So I want to ask you, so far, we've been about 4 or 5 weeks into this summer, what is like the best dad skill you feel like you've acquired so far?
Definitely using a saw and cutting wood. Will come in handy in the future.
Yes, Josh came and helped me work on my deck for a little while, and he got a lot of good practical training in carpentry.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, Josh. What dad skill are you hoping to acquire before the end of the summer?
Considering a dad needs a wife, maybe sharpen up on those skills. Not with the youth, obviously.
Obviously not. So sharpen up on your lady friend skills. Okay,
Yes.
well, maybe we can help you with that. I don't know.
Possibly.
Possibly so.
That's an extracurricular activity.
That's right.
Not
that's
work related.
No, not at all. And Josh has this really great shirt that he bought. It's from somewhere. It says dad, but the negative space of the D-A and D have like dad shapes mowing grass and stuff. It's awesome.
Got it from the Saudi Daisy Walmart. Anybody's interested.
Repping Saudi Daisy today.
Yeah.
But Josh has been a really great addition to our team this summer. We've been very grateful that he's been able to work with us. But the reason he's on the podcast, as I sort of teased in the cold open, is because Josh's story of coming to faith doesn't fit what a lot of us would consider kind of the standard mold. He didn't necessarily go through children's ministry and then right into youth ministry and then straight into Christian college and things like that. He's got some elements of that in there, which he'll talk to us about in a moment here. But he really came to faith a little bit later in his adolescence, which is not normal for a lot of the people that we have here at Clear Creek. So we wanted to get his story, like we got Abby's last week, about how he came to faith and how that has changed his perspective on his life moving forward. So, Josh, why don't you jump into this for us? Can you please tell us a little bit about your upbringing, how you were raised? And specifically, what exposure did you have to church and Christianity early on?
Yeah, so I was born in Knoxville, but we moved to Florida when I was really young. And so that kind of took away like our home church that my family had. And so we went to church kind of off and on in Florida. We went usually just to like the bigger services, such as like Christmas Eve or Easter. And we kind of went, like maybe twice a month, maybe at most throughout the year. My family kind of got comfortable with the church, but never really did. And my mom is a strong Methodist, so we went to a Methodist church. And so we kind of went there off and on. And then I moved to Tennessee in 8th grade, and that was when we kind of stopped going to church so much. We'd still go on Easter and Christmas Eve, but we never really had an established church really until later on when I came to college. That's when I really started going to church regularly.
Mm-hmm. So what caused you to become much more curious about faith? Because I know that you have come fully into faith at this point, but it was a little bit slower in coming than people that just get raised in the church. So what was it that caused you to become curious? Who may have been influential in your journey of spiritual discovery? How did they disciple you into a faith of your own?
Yeah, so I went to Hardin Valley Academy, which is right next to the Hardin Valley Church of Christ, both on Hardin Valley Road. And two of my best friends in high school, Andy and Peyton, were both frequent goers to the Hardin Valley Church of Christ. And they kind of invited me to a lot of youth group events, and they built a lot of relationship with me. But I think the thing that stood out to me the most was they were just very consistent in their like outreach to me. And even though I didn't really act on it when I was in high school, like I went to some youth group stuff, but it was never really my own investment, my own faith. I kind of just went to the youth group stuff just for fun, I guess. And so it wasn't until college when I went on a trip to Gulf Coast that's when I really bought into the faith. And that was like my big spiritual turnaround. But those two, Andy and Peyton, were huge for me. And then honestly, just having a community, which is what I got when I went to college, I think, which was my big turning point, was they were consistent with me, but they built the relationship first. They like got my trust and I trusted them. And then it was just little things like inviting me to a Bible study. And, I had never read like any of the Bible at that point. So I would go to these Bible studies and be completely overwhelmed. But that kind of built up my curiosity. I was like, there's so much here that I just don't understand. Like I knew the central, or maybe not the central, but I knew kind of part of the message of Christianity, like about Jesus, and that he died for our sins. But I didn't really know, like I never read like 90% of the Bible. And so it was kind of through going to Bible studies and just like little events where they would mention it and, make it a focal point of their lives that I was like, I want to see, if this is doing great things for them, then, I want to see what it can do for me. Yeah. And so I started, investing myself because of that. And I got curious about it.
One thing I heard you say, and our whole point in doing a conversation like this is to help somebody out there be inspired to be a disciple maker, much like these guys that you describe having helped make you into a disciple. But I heard you say, I don't know if this was the phrase exactly, but like intentional relational investment or consistent relational investment. They were continually trying to pull you in and draw you into conversations and invite you to youth group, I guess, right? But you were coming initially, I believe I heard you correctly, more for the social time, which is a big part of youth group, right? We love to get together with the kids. We love to have fun. We love to do these things, and it's great. But it just didn't end there with those guys, at least. They weren't going to let go of you,
Yeah.
not in terms of you being a mission for them. And over the course of time, with continued investment in community, with continued connection with people, with, them pulling you into Bible studies and you being more and more curious about, okay, I've heard this stuff before, but I see something different. Like that had eventually led you to say, okay, tell me more, right? Get me plugged in. So one thing I want to know, you were baptized fairly recently, fully into faith. I know it's been a long journey for you. You're halfway through college at this point, but what do you feel like is changing for you as you have come to believe in Jesus and trust in the Lord fully?
I think just my daily confidence in life, I think changed a lot. I think, I don't want to say I was lost before Jesus, but I think it just impacts every facet of your life when you have that purpose that you wake up with. And I think the biggest thing that it gave me too was an overwhelming urge to help others get there, because that's what it did for me. Was I really didn't have that community, and I didn't really know what I was missing, because you don't know until you've experienced it. And I didn't have that community before I came into Christ. And, that was what the CSC provided with me in a lot of senses before Andy and Peyton, or I guess after Andy and Peyton. And so, yeah, as soon as that happened, I just felt like I wanted to give back. I mean, at least just a little bit, and try to become more involved. And that led me to almost applying for this job, and then applying to be CSC president as well. It's just if I can make even a small impact, I want to be there and trying to do it. And so that was the biggest thing that changed right away. After I got baptized, is I felt like I was mature enough and ready enough to try to start giving back, and I was no longer only the disciple. And while people still disciple to me, I can start trying to disciple to others in the same way.
Okay. Obviously I knew that you are an intern. I knew that because you're here right now, but yeah. I did not know that you applied to be president of the Christian Student Center. Are you going to be that next year?
Yes, I am going to be the president.
Well, so within literally just a couple of years, you went from not being a 100% committed follower of Jesus to being in a leadership position of a campus ministry. It's pretty cool.
I don't know how it happened. It just did, but...
Well, what it shows me is that you decided, okay, if I'm going to be in on this, I'm going to be in on this. And I want to be as fully in as possible. If that means that I step up and help to lead other people through faith, does it matter that this kind of just happened for me? No, it doesn't matter. Let's go. And I think that's really important for our tens of listeners, as we joke, to hear, is that whether you've been a Christian for 30 years, as I'm surely some people that's listening to this will be, or if you just came to faith or are on the edge of taking that step in, you don't need to wait any longer than you've waited, and you really don't need to wait at all to become invested in the mission of what God has called all of us to do. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so you may have kind of touched on this already, but one thing we talk about here at Clear Creek is that every Christian is called to spread the good news of Jesus, to be a missionary wherever they find themselves, no matter how old they are, daily basis, looking for the next person. That's our mission, right? To reach the next person for Jesus. So speaking of that, how have you applied that idea of being an everyday missionary to your life in your relatively early spiritual journey here?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me is because I experienced it like personally is just I try every day, even just a little bit, to be an encouragement to somebody else. Like, I mean, say like just a very genuine compliment, or just find something about them you can compliment, or if you have a friend you haven't texted in a while, just text them, see how they're doing, reach out to them, because I think that's just definitely one of the most important things about Christianity and about building that community is that you want to encourage your fellow Christians as much as possible. And, I feel like I definitely feel like some days I might slip up on that, but that's something I try to hold myself to, is like, if I can pray for anybody or reach out to them, ask them if they need to be prayed for, or, just say like, how are you doing? What's going on? That's one way I think I try to, because I feel like it maintains your relationships, but also builds upon them at the same time, because, you're showing that investment, you're showing that care. And I think that meant so much for me personally. So if I can make somebody feel that way, I think it's completely worth it.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had anyone tell you that you may very well possess that spiritual gift of encouragement? The Barnabas gift?
I don't know if anybody's phrased it like that, like spiritual gift, but yeah. I think maybe something similar to that.
I mean, clearly it's something you're passionate about. So, I mean, lean into that, right? Yeah. Because it's so easy in some ways to say an encouraging word or send a simple message or give an attaboy to whoever. But it makes such an impact. I mean, have you experienced that yourself? Like, do you gain just like, oh man, thank you. Does it fill you with that when you receive such encouragement?
Yes. I mean, I think I'm a very emotional person sometimes. So like I can just go topsy-turvy, but like literally I've had days where, if I'm not having the best day and I get an encouragement, like just a text, it's like, hey man, love you, I miss you, let's catch up or something. It doesn't have to be anything significant, but like just to know that somebody else cares about how you're doing can literally make such a big difference, in my opinion. And so, I think, you don't have to like write an essay for somebody, but, just let them know that, you care about them, you're looking out for them.
Yeah.
And that, I think especially for men to men relationships, I think like a lot of like guys want to deny some of their emotional side. And like, that's, yeah. I think that's huge though for like men in the church, honestly. I don't know if I'm rambling here, but I think we don't do it enough. And so that's a big, big thing.
And we need it to.
Yeah.
Even us tough old grizzly guys, right?
Yeah, like us. They wouldn't know.
Just like us. No, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that idea of encouraging is such a valuable skill, ability. I mean, anyone can do it. Some people are better at it than others, but anyone can do it, and it makes an enormous difference. And eventually, if someone feels that you have been affirming to them and encouraging to them, they may come to you with something deep one day, because you've already built that trust and that connection of relationship with them. So who knows where that could take you, in the future. So I wanted to jump back here to what you're doing right now. So you interviewed with Michael to become one of our interns this summer. And I know you talked about Andy a couple times. Andy, for those of you that don't know, was our high school guy intern last summer. So good buddies of Josh. So you kind of knew our group a little bit just because you visited a couple times, but what was your motivation to want to come do this? You're not studying youth ministry or Bible, so why are you here right now?
Yeah, first, like, I think the journey here was really crazy because I thought about applying in like December or January, I want to say, when Ella got hired.
Which is our high school girl intern.
Yeah, and because we go to the CSC, and I was like, maybe I'm not mature enough, maybe I'm not ready, and so I never applied. And then Ella told me, I want to say in March, that this position was still unfilled, and I was like, I don't know, I just felt like it was like literally like God's timing. I was like, this is a second chance, like maybe I am ready, and so I just applied, and I ended up getting it. Obviously, I'm here now, but I think the biggest motivation for me, for sure, was simply just to give back. Like I felt kind of, I talked about earlier, but I felt such an overwhelming urge, just because it changed my life. Just people investing into me, investing relationships into me, investing time into me. And, I saw what it did for me, and, it gave me that community. I didn't really know what I was missing. Like I said, like freshman year of college, I went to some CSC stuff, but that was before I was fully invested. I wouldn't say that was my community. And I could see the positive change in my life from freshman year to sophomore year after I became acquainted with that community and I was like plugged in. And so, if I can, bring just one teen closer to Jesus or closer to that community, that's would mean the world to me, just because it meant the world to me when I did it, or when it was done on me. So, that was my biggest motivation, was just to give back. In a small way, big way, however I can make a positive impact. That's what I wanted to do.
There's another thing you said that I thought was important to emphasize. You said, well, maybe I am ready. Mm-hmm. So sign me up, right? That's so good for all of us to hear. Is like, if you're sitting there going, I don't know if I'm ready yet, you're ready. You're ready for something, right? It may not be go sign up for a youth internship. Most of you listening probably aren't in that zone right now, but there's something waiting for all of us. Just if we're willing to say, okay, maybe I'm ready, jump in. And I'm sure that was a little bit intimidating because you'd not done this before, but you're doing a great job. Way to go, buddy.
Thank you.
And I would say that you are ready. Plenty of things to learn, of course, but the willingness is the most important part of this equation, because God will provide you with the knowledge and the skills and the abilities and the practice, frankly. But you got to be willing. So I'm glad you got to kind of exemplify that. So how are you trying to lead our high school students toward discipleship?
Yeah, I think just being a positive role model is like the first and foremost. I think like Matt Moore told me once, actually, at our spring retreat, which this is like stuck with me. I don't really know why, but I think it was so like impactful. This was for UT, or like the CSC, our spring retreat. He said, you can't give what you don't have. And so I think the way I try to lead them is, anything that I tell them advice-wise or spiritually, I try to embody that as best I can. But I think first and foremost, you have to build a relationship with them, because that's, how it got to me, was the relationship aspect of it. And if I didn't have the trust, as you mentioned, the trust and relationship with the people trying to disciple me, I don't think I ever would have, came through or really received their message. So, first just try to get to know them better, have fun with them. But then, after that, or besides, on top of that, I should say,
Sure.
Embody what I'm trying to, preach to them, or, what if I give a lesson, try to embody that message. But then, after you've kind of built some relationship and trust, get to know them more spiritually, where they're at, what they're struggling with, what they feel like they're good at, what their spiritual gifts may be, and then just try to encourage them, get them, even if it's just a small impact, get them more spiritually mature or more spiritually invested, because I think everybody's capable of giving back in some sense. And so
even high school students?
Yes, for sure.
Even them.
They can disciple to their fellow high school students. That's what happened to me, honestly, It was other high school students. So
you are a testament to what you're now trying to do, which is encourage other high school students to minister to their peers.
Yeah, like every age group has a different perspective. And so the high schoolers can do stuff for the other high schoolers that I can't do or you can't do, because they go to school with them and they're the same age. So I would really urge them to, that's something, if I can encourage just one of them to try to disciple to fellow high schoolers, or even when they get to college, just disciple fellow college students, because every one of them is capable of that. Sure. Everybody is. So
You're speaking from within the context of high school youth ministry, but everything you just said applies to anyone, no matter what age, demographic zone, phase of life you're in, right? Building relationships. We say all the time, I didn't make this up, but nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. Talking about relational connection that leads you to the opportunities to speak truth into their lives. Like that's true with a 15-year-old. It's true with a 30-year-old. It's true with a 65-plus-year-old, right? Anybody needs to be connected to in order to receive the truth of the gospel that you would like to provide for them. So it's very, very good things. Now, I know, we say this a lot, I know this whole thing is not all that easy, right? And surely you have experienced some obstacles. So what are some of those things that you maybe even continue to struggle with in your faith journey so far?
I think big one for me is, I mean, this is kind of being vulnerable, but like I would see all my friends, they would go to church for their whole family, and that was just like never me. And that would always make me question, like, should I really be here? And that's kind of a different angle, I guess. But that was always something I struggled with in the beginning, was like, we would go to church with all the college students, like during school, and then we'd go home. And, I would go with like Andy's family just because my family wasn't regularly attending church. And so that was something that always, I still struggle with even after getting baptized. It's like, and that just goes, I mean, I should be more confident in my faith, and so that it doesn't matter who I'm going with, because that's what was the big change for me, I think, is when I was ready to go just for myself, it didn't matter who I was going with. I could sit by myself at church, that none of that mattered. It wasn't like family pressure, society pressure, it was just me going because, I love God and I want to invest in my own faith. And then definitely just, staying confident in your faith, just because it's all relatively new to me. It's like sometimes I feel like, because I didn't have that like structure growing up, I can get back into maybe bad habits that I had before I came into faith. And so those are probably the two biggest struggles, is just trying not to get back into bad habits. And then obviously like the family thing, that just made me doubt. I was like, am I really where I should be? Just because like you want to be with your family, obviously. And like I kind of had to sacrifice that. I missed like Sunday morning and afternoon with them to go to church and be with the other college students or friends and stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting perspective there. So this is sort of a summary question, but what lessons do you think you've learned about how to disciple from the way that you were discipled?
I think being consistent is the first one. I think don't disciple in hopes that you're going to get something in return necessarily, because that will discourage you very quickly. I think with some people, you may disciple to somebody and like overnight, they're fully fledged
They're ready
Christian.
to go.
Yeah, like it's, but some people, you're going to,
that's not normal.
Yeah, for me, it took me years. I feel like the seed was planted when I was in high school, but it never really grew until college. So I think if you're discipling anybody, just be consistent and don't let, I don't want to say lack of results, but lack of, seeing progress. Don't let that discourage you, because sometimes progress is unseen, I think, especially spiritually, maybe when it's somebody else. You may not see what's going on for them. And then I'd say just like be kind always. That was something that I felt a lot, just because like I moved to Tennessee in high school and I didn't have a big friend group. And Andy and Peyton reaching out to me, was so impactful for me. Like it really helped, start that community for me. And it was in like the Christian context too. So I saw, where it was coming from, why they were doing it. And that was huge for me, just because, I mean, you never know, literally you can reach out to somebody and it can just change their life. Cause I feel like that was, one time they reached out to me and it changed my whole path, honestly. So I'd say be kind and be consistent are the two biggest ones, because encouraging, you never know how far that can go. Just a word of kindness, and being consistent even when you don't maybe see results or progress is huge, because sometimes you're just not going to see it. But I know for me, speaking from my own story, that was huge for me. It took me years to get there, but I eventually, got there.
Absolutely. So somebody listening to this might be thinking, yeah, Josh, that sounds great, man. But I don't have exposure to people perhaps that I can disciple, or even as simple as that sounds, I don't feel confident enough in my own faith or testimony or skill set to be a disciple maker. All right, if somebody's listening, they're feeling that way, what would you say to them to encourage them?
I think you just got to trust God and trust Jesus. It sounds corny, but I can't remember what verse it is, but Jesus invites the disciples to follow him, and they just drop everything and they just follow him. And I think if you go in with that mindset, you're going to make progress. You're going to have success. I think kind of like what I said in the last question is don't weigh your like value or your ability based on seeing progress in other people. Just slowly, make relationship with them, encourage them, and then you can start to see spiritual fruit grow, I think, with them. And I think it's capable. I mean, I talked about with high schoolers. I think everybody's capable of discipling in some sense. And I think you can do that. It doesn't even have to be through sharing Bible verses or anything. Sometimes I think you're discipling you don't even know just because you're being kind or you're sending an encouraging word. And so, just do things like that show them, the love of Jesus, the love of God. And then eventually when they feel that, you can tell them about it. And I think it'll resonate a lot more when you're discipling them. So.
Yeah, maybe you could say like intentionally live out the character of Christ in all of your relationships at all times, and it'll open doors.
Yeah, and do your best to do that, because I think definitely you're going to struggle at some points, because I know I struggle with like always being loving. Like, think when I get sad, I don't want to send an encouraging word to anybody, but go easy on yourself and just keep working at it.
Mm-hmm. There's grace large enough for all of us.
Yeah, definitely.
Praise God for that. Well, that's all the time we've got for today's chat. Josh, thank you for coming on today and sharing your story, sharing with us your desire to be a wonderful dad one day. And I think you will be, for the record.
Thank you.
Yes.
That means a lot.
Keep working on those skills, those miter cut saw skills, and you'll be fine, man.
I'm excited.
You build your own deck one day.
For that day.
For that day.
Yeah.
If there's any young ladies out there, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Not accepting applications right now.
He's not accepting applications.
I have internship.
That's right. He's busy. He's got a lot of things to do this summer. But for all the rest of you out there, if you are a disciple, you are called to make disciples and to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to your neighbors throughout your city and to the very ends of the earth. Grace and peace.